Kind greetings and welcome to the July 9th, 2020 live broadcast, Triumphant Thursdays with Chaplain PJ. Our purpose is to bring to consciousness various subjects that impact and intersect with global peoples. Our goal is that you will be empowered to answer the call to action and thereby have an opportunity to experience your own triumphant Thursdays. Our subject tonight is How I Survived Domestic Violence. I anticipate that this will be a great evening with our guest, the Reverend Dr. Mrs. Crystal Walker, author of Silence is No Longer an Option, a pastoral response to violence. She is also the co-pastor with her husband of a church called Before the Club Ministries. Her husband is the Reverend Shelby Walker, and they live in Indianapolis, Indiana. Before bringing Dr. Crystal on, we want to invite you to host a watch party. Call and invite your family and friends to join you in submitting comments and asking questions in the chat room. And now, brothers and sisters and brothers, we present to you the Reverend Dr. Mrs. Crystal Walker. Welcome, Dr.
Thank
Crystal
you.
Walker. How are you?
I'm great. Traveling
Yes,
unexpectedly
I
at this
see.
time.
I see you're traveling. Well, you know, it's probably a wonderful thing to do with this COVID lighting up just a little bit to get out and get some fresh air. And it's wonderful that you have your husband with you. And I want to say to the audience before you start talking that the book is an amazing book. I had the privilege, uh, as I'm sharing with the audience that is listening and or watching, to be Dr. Crystal's advisor as she was doing her doctoral work at the United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. And I have been reading again today her dissertation, which holds the same topic as her book, or the same title as her book. Silence is no longer an option, a pastoral response to domestic violence. And I was wondering, Dr. Crystal, how did you decide? Because ultimately, this ended up being um, a tool for pastors to use in having conversation from the pulpit on the subject of domestic violence. How did you select your pastors, and how many of them came willingly, and how many of them eventually came along? Perhaps after the fact, have you heard from those who initially resisted come back to you and offer an opportunity for you to come to their church and have a workshop and share with the congregation that silence is no longer an option?
Absolutely not. So those pastors who are still resisting are still resisting.
Okay.
My husband will say that, pastors do not like to be told what to teach from their pulpit or from their biblical lessons. And I can certainly understand that. However, I don't, and I still don't understand the reluctance to teach about domestic violence when it's affecting at least a quarter of your church, up to a half of your church. If 1 in every 4 women are affected by domestic violence, and 1 in every 6 men are, and then the person who may be afflicting the domestic violence on the other is a part of that congregation as well, then it's a serious subject that's no longer being taught or hasn't been taught. In fact, one of the references, Reverend Al Miles out of Hawaii, wrote one of the very first books that I used on this topic, and he was invited to something, and I want to say it was in Minnesota, but it was somewhere Midwest. He was invited to a conference where he was told that there were going to be 1,000 people in the audience. A lot of them pastors, a lot of them social workers. He got to the place where he was going to speak. There were 4 pastors in the audience and lots of social workers. Um, so this topic has gone on um, and is still not being addressed as it should be in the churches.
Let's do a broad sweep here. I know that you define domestic violence in your appendix, but I'm curious to know if you identified specific persons in Holy Writ that experienced domestic violence, or if you identified particular scriptures that gives leave, kind of almost gives permission uh, for pastors to use particular scriptures to encourage domestic violence. I remember one that you used was wives submit to your husbands. And I find it absolutely fascinating that when preachers preach that particular scripture, that rarely, if ever, do they include the preceding scripture, which reads, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church.
As Christ loved the church.
Are there other scriptures that promote that gives the impression, the patriarchal flavor to being abusive, whether that is sexual abuse or verbal abuse or financial abuse? And I would like for you to define all of those abuses when we get there. So right now, let's talk about theological abuse.
Sure. And you pointed out one of the largest scriptures is that wives submit to their husbands, and submission doesn't mean domination. So when you're talking about submission, you're talking about, first of all, that the man is a Christian man who would not um, be harsh with their wives, and that's scriptural. It says, "Husbands, do not be harsh with your wives." Um, so you have to dive deeper into a lot of scriptural context, and um, wives are not slaves. Wives are, a lot of the scriptures that are talking about the women are, under the man, or not as good as the male figure because the woman was the first one to sin. That's other scriptures that's used to keep women in a subjective role. um, so there's lots of theological information that is used to put a woman in her place.
Oh, you think a woman has a place and it's not the
That
White
wives
House?
are yeah, that wives are not allowed, or women are not allowed to teach men. That's one of the scriptures that's used to keep women pastors out of contact. So when you keep women pastors out of the pulpit, then you're again putting a woman in her place. Um, Back to the Old Testament, where you have the women who were not allowed to be property owners, but yet you had the three sisters that went up and said, you know what, this was our dad's property, and I want to make sure that we're getting our part of it, and they were heard. And even to the point of where, the widow had to talk to Jesus, and Jesus was like, she was like, well, I'll take some of the crumbs off of the table that you're feeding the dogs. So there's lots of scriptures that can place women down, and that a lot of men use to do that. Not only was it scripturally based, but it was put into laws, into your older thing, like the rule of thumb. So the rule of thumb said that a man could not hit a woman with anything that was larger than his thumb. Well, if you had a big man, that had a big thumb, then you might get beat with a big old pole or something. So it's not only biblically based, but it was put into the rules of our society, and it continues to go on and be fed today. One point that I would really like to put out there is that the four largest abusers of women are policemen, doctors, clergy, and military. So when
So
you're talking,
clergy is
a lot of
in the
clergy
mix.
that are kind of,
Clergy is in the mix.
yeah, when you're talking about a lot, yes. So when you're talking about clergy that are not wanting to preach and teach, it may be because, just may be because they're perpetuators of domestic violence.
And Dr. Crystal, what do you suggest that we do about people who internalize and sanction domestic abuse? Bishop Flunder has a saying. Bishop Yvette A. Flunder, founder of City of Refuge, United Church of Christ, and also founder of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, and the prelate, uh, uses a phraseology that has become quite popular in recent years. Wasn't as popular when I first heard her say it, and it's hurt people. What do you say to a person who is being abused and thinks that it's okay?
Well, first of all, a lot of people don't understand the dynamics of abuse, that they have actually grown up in that situation where they think that that's normal. So when you're saying that hurt people, and they feel that that's a normal situation to grow up in, they don't understand all of the dynamics of abuse, then sure, they're going to do that. The only way to stop abuse from continuing is to stop the cycle of violence. So there's a big circle and cycle of violence of where, there's attention build up. Um, then there's the abuse. Then there's the honeymoon pattern, and then it goes back into the tension cycle. So there's many factors in those different cycles
Mhm.
of abuse. Um, and a lot of children, when they're growing up in these homes, they just feel that that's the way. And you have an abuser, whether it be male or female, that's bringing the children into their web, let's say. So
One of
what
the
happens is that these
No, go ahead.
children are bought into the web, and then they're against the person that's being abused because they see that person as being weak, and they want to be on the strong side, and they're protecting themselves too. So there's two things going on there. They're self-protecting themselves from being abused, and they're seeing the other person as being weak. So they grow up to be that type of abuser, or that type of person that is seen as the strong person in a relationship.
So the person that is doing the abusing, it perceives him or herself as strong.
That's what the children are seeing, and that's what the person actually is giving into their weakness. The abuser is giving into their weakness, because strong people do not feel the need to dominate someone else. Strong people are are okay with being themselves and letting other people be themselves. So strong people are okay with your individuality and theirs. The weakness of the abuser is trying to dominate, to control what the other person is thinking because they're afraid for themselves. They're afraid that they're going to lose whatever control they have. They're afraid of weakness, or just multiple things they're afraid of. So the abuser is not the strength, but the people that are being abused and the people that are trying to stop from being abused see that person as the strength in a relationship.
One of the characters that you talk about, or actually you talk about yourself, and I don't know where you got the strength to write what you wrote. But you're frozen again, Crystal. But I'll ask the question anyway. Um, you say in your book that you managed to escape one of your abusers, and who was your husband, and you divorced him, and you managed to get away, and you were away for about 8 or 9 months, and eventually he caught up with you, and he begged and he pleaded and he promised and he did all of that, and you went back, and the abuse was worse after that than it was before. What would you advise people who are listening, and men and women who have been abused and who have been the abuser, but more to those who have been abused? Uh, what would how do you resist that? How did you yield to that one last plea? Give me one more chance. How did that come about?
Well, it takes an average of 7 times for an abusive someone that's being abused to leave the relationship. An average of 7 times. So that wasn't the first time that I left him. It wasn't the second time. I tried to escape multiple times, and if you're reading the book, it was multiple times from multiple people. Um, so it's when you're ready. It's when you have prepared your mind and your soul and your heart to be ready. My mind, soul, and heart wasn't ready to leave that relationship because I remember, as most people remember, with their significant other or spouses, the good times, the times when it was beautiful and perfect and romantic and you know love, love, love. And that's what the abuser shows in that cycle. So that honeymoon period comes about after um, continuous times of saying, "Oh yeah, that I'm not going to do it again, and I'm going to give you roses, and I'm going to give you flowers, and thank God, my flowers weren't on my grave." Um, but
Yes.
it it happens, and you are caught into that. First of all, you're caught into that. I don't believe that I'm in this relationship. There was a lot of times when I was in the relationship that I was like, I must be imagining this. This is certainly not happening to me. I'm a pretty strong woman. I don't I don't believe I'm into this. I'm making more of it than it is. And then I would come to reality like, yeah, this is happening. This is happening. Um, and when you're talking about, so I know we'll probably get to this later, but when you're talking about leaving a relationship, my ways of leaving it was to get smarter. I read and read and read about domestic violence. I read about one of the greatest books was written by a man. It was called Why He Does That, Into the Minds of Angry and Abusive Men by Lundy Bancroft. Um, and I researched and I said, you can beat me, you can emotionally abuse me, you can do anything you want to me, but what you can't take away from me is my education. You know,
Okay.
I can learn, I can be smart, and you can't take that away. Whatever else you're trying to take away, okay, but that you can't.
And
So,
but you didn't say you can't take away my life.
but because you could have,
Yes, yes. Yes, and we
yeah,
do want to get to that later in terms of what can be done to reach that point where, no more. I'm done, and how to get out of that safely. But before we get to that, I'd like to ask for you to define the various types of abuse. We know that there is verbal abuse, and we grew up with this saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, that's not true. Words can be just about as harmful as hitting on a person. So we know that verbal, and you know what I've discovered is that with verbal abuse, you don't even have to raise your voice. It's not how you say it so much as what you say. Would
right.
you agree with that?
Absolutely. So verbal abuse is one of the worst. There's physical abuse, and unfortunately, our court system really only looks at physical abuse as the main component as to whether to file charges against the man or woman. So physical abuse is one. There's actually financial abuse. So the person controls all of the money in or out of the household and keeps the person is being abused broke and poor and dependent on him or her. There is, believe it or not, electronic abuse. So someone is stalking the Facebook page and or knows all of the um, information that you have on any social media, knows all of your information, passwords, and so forth. Um, there's actually something when you're taught to leave a relationship, whereas you get rid of your Kroger cards, even your um, CVS cards, all of your cards that have your information, because you can be tracked by your social media, by any electronic means. There's abuse where, say, you're an illegal immigrant, where the person will say, I'm going to call immigration and have you sent back to your country, but I'm going to keep your children. There's abuse like that. And in Lundy's book, there were so many other different types of abuses, and I was like, wow, I could check off all of these abuses and say that I've been through them. So there's more abuses than I could even name on here. And again, the biggest thing that someone can do for him or herself is to read and find out what kind of abuse you may be living under, because it is not always someone hitting you. It is abuse is all about power and control. So if someone is exercising power and control in your life, then they are abusing you.
So under what category, in addition to physical abuse, uh, what do you call an adult who beats the children to keep the spouse in line. Is that would be for the spouse mental abuse?
That would be mental and physical.
Okay, because they're beating on the children,
Yes,
which
which is controlling the spouse.
which is controlling the spouse. And the same with well, and there are other abuses that, and I don't know if we
There's
have.
even animal abuse. I mean, there's, people love their animals, and there have been instances where the family pet has been killed to tell to keep the person in line.
And so I mean, neither one of us are physicians or psychiatrists, but take a shot at what kind of abuse it is a when a when a husband and a wife or two partners um, kill their children and fly away to other side of the country, and I can't, we can't call.
I know what you're talking
Okay,
about. Yeah,
what
yeah.
kind of abuse is that? Yeah, what kind of abuse is that?
I I don't, in that particular situation, um, and I know, the case that you're talking about. I don't know that the both of them were not involved in that. Um, so I really can't speak on what type of abuse that was until it kind of comes out, as if both of them were involved or if one of them was involved. But if just one was involved and kept the other kind of under thumb, then um, that's kind of like the maybe Patty Hearst situation where um, what is that, like Stockholm syndrome,
Okay.
something like that.
Well, it certainly is a subject that is, I think, would be it would be interesting if our colleges, other than, well, all of our colleges and all of our seminaries would do a course on um, theological, physical, mental, financial, sexual, and abuse, so that we would graduate with some understanding of these things. But for right now, Crystal, we are going to pause for station identification. We'll be back in a few minutes. We have some announcements that we want to share with the listening and viewing audience. And so, Pastor Sue, we're going to ask you to start with announcing Pastor Crystal's book and sharing with the audience that the title of the book, and there's the author of the book, Silence is No Longer an Option, a pastoral response to domestic violence. And I believe we have the wherewithal to order that book. That you may contact Dr. Crystal directly at their church's website, which is Before the Club Ministries, or BTC Ministries, at yahoo.com, if I remember correctly. And if not, Pastor Crystal can correct us on that when she comes back. And next, we want to show you the abilities and the special. There it is, BTC Ministries at yahoo.com. The book sells for $20. I believe that is correct. It's either 20 or 25. And we'll also get that information to you. We want to show off our administrator, Pastor Sue Webley, who is the founder of Kara Solutions, associate pastor of Rivers of Living Waters Ministry, United Church of Christ, and the national minister of youth and young adult ministries for the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. founded by my pastor and our prelate, the Honorable Reverend Dr. Bishop Yvette A. Flunder. We also want to give a shout out for Pastor Sue's pastor, the Reverend Dr. and Bishop elect Vanessa N. Brown, Rivers of Living Waters United Church of Christ, New York, New Jersey. Pastor Sue, there she is. You can reach her. This is just one of her many um, uh, ways of presenting her wares. She does live stream and Zoom video conferencing. Um, as a matter of fact, she's kind of doing the back end support today. You don't won't get an opportunity to see her unless she chooses to show herself. And there she is. Isn't she gorgeous? I tell you, that's our beautiful administrator.
Yeah.
And do we have other announcements that
Yes.
you can put up? Let's let them roll.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we invite you to her Friday afternoon programs at 4:30. It's called Walking Heavy with Sue and Renee. And I'm telling you, they are comical. They are serious, and they have some doggone incredible conversation. And I've just gone to our live chat, and while you keep that up there, Pastor Sue, or you can put the our speaker's book back on. We have several comments. We want to welcome Catherine Young. We don't know where she's from. We have Faithful Wanda, who says, "Hi, ladies, nice forum." Then we have Catherine Young, and let's see, we have Catherine Young here several times. Good evening, Chaplain PJ and Dr. Crystal. Will we say the same to you, Catherine Young? We have a long standing friend, Sherman Scott. Sherman and I have been friends for 53 years. Now, you know, everybody can't say that they have had one friend for 53 years, but it has been that long, and it's a good friendship. I love this man. I just have to say it online. I love this man. Sister Carolyn Young reminds us that this can be a learned behavior, that abuse can be a learned behavior. So, do we have other advertisers? There we go. Next week we are having our annual, or maybe semi-annuals, every other year, that we have a leadership conference. This year it is virtual. We invite you to join us beginning on I believe it's the 14th, 15th, and 16th. You see to my left, and I suppose you're right, our presiding bishop, Yvette Flunder, and our Episcopal assistant, Bishop Wyatt Greenlee, who pastors Glory to Glory United Church of Christ in St. Louis, and Bishop Flunder is the pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ. Both of them are founding pastors. And let's see, you can register at is that event? There we go. If you can see that, you can go there to register. You do not have to be a member of the leadership team, or a member of the United Church of Christ, or a member of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. That being said, though, you will not find, it is not likely that you're going to find a conference quite like this conference. It is multicultural. It is multiracial. It is opposite gender loving. It is same gender loving. It is transgender. It is cisgender. I mean, all of God's creation is loved and represented in this group. And if you are struggling with your identity, and many of us are. We won't admit it because we have been brought up in churches that do not allow us to explore our options. Uh, this is the ideal place to hook up with. And by the next time we come on and advertise this, uh, we will be able to give you a list of where you can find a fellowship church where you can learn who you are, and that whoever you are, God has created you to be exactly that. God makes no mistakes. You are not a mistake. I am not a mistake. However, you choose to identify. But we've been brainwashed, we've been whitewashed. I tell you, that plantation theology done messed up most of our lives. But all that notwithstanding, consider registering. It's a $50 registration. Consider registering, and we'll also try to put that link on Facebook, on my Facebook page, so that you can go there and hit the link. And my Facebook page, of course, is Space for Grace Without Walls, United Church of Christ. And I think we have one more. It, oh, well, of course. Triumphant Thursdays with Chaplain PJ. We will need to make one adjustment because on the 16th of July, we will be in the conference. We'll be in the leadership conference. And so we'll move the 16th to the 23rd and the 23rd to the 30th. On the 23rd, we will have a master class called The Law of Attraction. And Chaplain Maureen Burns, who was last year at our convocation. See, one year we have the convocation, and the next year we have the leadership conference, and back to the convocation. So at our convocation last year, Bishop ordained Maureen Burns as a chaplain for and in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, as I have been ordained as a chaplain, uh, specifically as a chaplain in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. And our focus, both Chaplain Maureen and I, our focus is on veterans and LGBTQ veterans uh, and allies. So she will be our facilitator on the 23rd with the law of attraction, teaching us the basics. You don't want to miss that. And the following week, which would be the 30th of July, she will be doing a second master class on transformation is possible. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So we hope that you will join us next week, or rather on the 16th, that you will join us on the 16th at the conference. How about that? Okay, so let's go back and bring Dr. Crystal back in. And I want to thank you so much, Dr. Crystal. Okay. Yes, Reverend Pastor Sue.
Here
Wonderful.
I am.
Here you are. Um, One of the questions that has come up in our live chat, in our private chat rather, would you consider domestic violence to be a generational curse?
No, it's not a generational curse. Domestic violence, I believe someone brought that up in the chat room, is a learned behavior. So until we can again break the cycle of domestic violence, and that means letting people know that it's not okay, that this is not the normal, we'll never get past it. So it's not a generational curse, but it is. And Senator Joe Biden at the time said this specifically, it's a pandemic.
Mm.
Um, One of the things that happens with domestic violence, and I wanted to bring this up, so I'm glad you just opened that door for me to do that. But one of the things that happens with domestic violence is that it keeps getting put back on the shelf. Um, it'll it'll be let down for a period of time and examined and looked at, and then there'll be things like the pandemic that's come up or Black Lives Matter, both of which are extremely important. But domestic violence happens every day. Every 3 minutes, someone is murdered. Every so many seconds, 8 seconds, I believe it is, someone is abused. So this is something that happens all day, every day, and it keeps getting put on the shelf because something else important comes up, and
So,
people don't. Go ahead.
no, no, please.
Oh, people don't think that, abuse is prevalent or important, or, a lot of people think, well, that's just a fight between two grown people. It is not a fight between two grown people. It is all about power and control.
And you
And if
know, it's also while you're
someone
unfreezing, it's also a
exercising their power over someone else, and we don't have power over anyone.
that is true. I forgot what I was going to say while you were freezing. I think what I was going to say is that we want to remind people that the four top professionals, and I want to emphasize the word professionals because this goes across economic borders, this goes across ethnic borders, this goes across religious borders, that the top four professionals who are prone to practice um, domestic violence. Number one are cops. Now, I want to park here, police officers, I want to park here parenthetically and ask the question, do you think that is what's making it so difficult to dismantle the violence that unmerciful police officers just herald onto people that they stop. Now, one of the things before you answer that, one of the things that we've done that our beloved mayor has done and Police Chief Green has done here in the city of Lansing is they are putting a proposal or they are adopting a proposal where you cannot stop a person for a broken tail light. That it has to be something more like you run a red light or your brake lights are completely out. But no more stopping because of tail lights or because you have hanging on your mirror, some object. But now that I've parked there parenthetically, let me come back to the question. Do you think that domestic violence, that police officers are number one in domestic violence, and that we're seeing that in the way that they treat our black and brown men when they stop them for something as minor as a broken tail light?
I don't know that that mirrors or marries with domestic violence. I think that marries with systemic racism.
Okay.
Um, it's the There is of course the same dynamics of power and abuse in those relationships, but I don't think that it's a marriage of domestic violence more than it's a marriage of systemic racism.
Okay, so thank you. That's incredible. I appreciate that response. I think is an excellent response. And the number two in the category was physicians.
Yes.
Now here we are talking about people who raise their right hand and swear before themselves and those that are swearing them in and Almighty God to be healers.
Hmm.
Does that sound like they're bipolar? Does that sound like they're schizophrenic? Does that sound like they're both good and evil? I mean, how do you, what category does that kind of a mind? See, I can understand the police officer being abusive. I really, really can. Don't like it, would not accept it, but I can understand because police officers are abused every day, all day long.
Right.
But a physician, a man or a woman that has been taught to care for, has been taught to heal, what's going on in that person's how what is the conflict?
Okay. This is what I think, and this is not a this is a my opinion kind of thing. For a physician, it would be about the power. So the physician has the God complex a lot. Um, they feel that they are the ultimate healer. So when you have a God complex and say someone isn't doing right, I had a run in with a physician a few months ago when I changed my endocrinologist, and I went to the first appointment and my blood sugar level was up so high. He looked at me, he was like, "Well, what's the point?"
Mhm.
I'm like, "Well, you're the doctor." We can both have attitudes here, but so say
Good
you have
answer.
right. So say you have a physician who has a God complex, and you're not doing exactly what that physician says in order to supposedly heal yourself, and that physician, gets mad, gets upset, wants to beat you into submission to do what it is that he or she feels that you need to do. So it's just a power dynamic there
Dr. Crystal, we're going to have
to
to
me.
put a pin right there. We're out of time, which means first of all
Okay.
first of all I want you to please tell Pastor Shelby happy belated birthday and that his card is sitting right here next to me. And I will be sending it to him as soon as I decide it's okay to leave my house.
I will do that. And I
And
hope you get well.
yes, and the second thing that I want to say is that we may very well, because this is getting good. I didn't think we'd be able to do it in an hour, but I was saying that what we can do is ask Chaplain Mo if you can take the 23rd of July. If you when you get home and look at your calendar, see if you're available on the 23rd of July to be our guest, and we will call that show How I Survived Domestic Violence Revisited. Would that be all right with you?
That sounds like a plan.
All right, that sounds like a plan. And also wanted to remember to ask you, you say in your ministry focus second paragraph, as an only child and one that was rejected by the outside world. That's where I would like to start number two. We're going to start next time talking about uh, the number three in the line of persons most likely to be abusive, and number four. And then I'd like to go into that question, and then we'll see what else others will say. So if there are any questions that people will send in at that time. So again, we want to show you the title of Dr. Crystal's work, and is it 20 or 25?
20.
Uh, and here is Dr. Crystal and the cover of her book, Silence is No Longer an Option, a pastoral response to domestic violence. I would encourage you to purchase the book for $20. Her email address is the name of the church is
Oh no, it's not. Let me give you the email address. You
okay.
got you ready?
Yes.
It's Dr. Crystal, Crystal, the number one at yahoo.com.
All right. I think our pastor and administrator will be able to get that up. It is Dr. Crystal. There it is. Dr. Oh, isn't she phenomenal?
She
Phenomenal.
is phenomenal.
Isn't she just amazing? You go with your bad self, Pastor Sue. Put your advertisement up there next, please. This lady that's doing this remarkable work is Pastor Sue. There's her Kyra Solutions is the name of her company, and you can email her for a free consultation. And as a paying member of her organization, I can tell you that she is so reasonable. I don't know how, I just, it's just amazing to me how reasonable her work is. And I think she's going to put up there Triumphant Thursdays. That is also her work. And just to give you a little bit of a taste of her work. So now that we know that we won't be here on the 16th, we're going to ask Pastor Reverend Dr. Crystal to take the 23rd for how I survived domestic violence revisited. And now that we get even closer to the end, I have one more minute to ask you to please join the Lansing NAACP or your local NAACP chapter. Please register to vote. Not only register to vote, but vote and take 5 people with you. Wear your masks if it turns out that you cannot vote by mail. I understand from a colleague that you can get the whole shield for $4.99 at Sam's Club. Um, and you want to do that. You definitely want to register and vote. Now, why do you want to do that? Let me just share with you very briefly, and God knows I'm out of time, and I do want to give um, a shout out to Gwendolyn Bodiford, who has also been a guest on the show, and she sends us this message like so many things: domestic violence, racism, hate crimes, etc. All of these are sins, meaning persons disconnected with God. There it is. Thank you, Pastor Sue. We hesitate to call these acts what they are. Sin is not acceptable to God, and we need to start addressing these acts, what they are, sinful acts. And that is very, very true. And you're right, Sister Gwendolyn. We need to get back to using biblical language and explaining in contemporary language what that sinful language looks like. I was listening to a podcast the other night. I'll give him a shout out. The Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, and he was doing a Bible study, and he used the illustration in terms of bringing using archaic language, bringing it up to contemporary language, and he was saying, imagine Holy Writ being recorded on an 8 track. Now, I don't know how many on the line remember the 8 track tapes, but those were some bulky, of course, now the cell phones are becoming, in my opinion, a little bulky. But think of the era of the 8 track, or even of the what's the little one, cassette. You can even think of the cassette in relation to where I'm going with this story. That imagine Holy Writ on that, and having to explain it today on social media, and maybe you'll use a SBC uh, um, way of communicating the archaic language. This is his point. Transfer the information to something more listenable, or something that won't make a person stop listening. Uh, but keep the essence, keep the principle of the matter. Now, Sister Gwendolyn, I agree we need to use the word sin, but if I were to define the word sin, it would be separated from God or missing the mark. And I don't think that we don't I don't think we say that enough. But anyway, I don't want to get on that. Thank you, Sister Gwendolyn, for your because I can this is so exciting to me. I can go on and on. Let me finish. That we will Sister Crystal will get the information out to you about Dr. Crystal doing our July 23rd class. All right. If you would please, we're going to just outright ask you, everyone that's listening, if you would send us a contribution. I don't want to put a dollar sign on it. We appreciate $1. We appreciate $1 million. We live a life of gratitude. So send $1 or $2, please, to Dr. Well, let's see. PayPal, there it is. One or more, please support us at PayPal to Dr. PJ Anderson at spaceforgrace.org. Now, here is another invitation that I hope someone will take advantage of. If you would like to be on Triumphant Thursdays, now we call it that. We expect for you to be triumphant every day. We want you to celebrate triumphant Mondays and triumphant Tuesdays, all of that. But if you would help us try by becoming a guest on the show, you listen. We will record you from wherever you are. Dr. Crystal is on the road with her husband, driving back to Indianapolis, Indiana. You can be as far west as Maui, Hawaii, and that's where Chaplain Maureen Burns lives. You can be as far east as Asia Minor. Wherever you are, if you would like to have a discussion on this show, send me an email. That's all it takes. Send me an email, Dr. PJ Anderson at spaceforgrace.org, and give me your subject and where I can reach you. I will not share your telephone number, but I will call and we can have a chat about it. It doesn't cost you to be on the show. We do ask that those of you who have been on the show and those of you who are watching tonight to start making a monthly contribution. However, uh, we offer that to you because I know you've got some wonderful things that you would like to talk about, and we would be honored. We would be pleased to have you on Triumphant Thursdays with Chaplain PJ. I believe that that is going to take us truly, truly to our final words of encouragement. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Now, why does Philippians, the fourth chapter and the eighth verse, want you to think on those things? Because Proverbs tell us, as a person thinks, and usually when I think of thinking, I think of the heart, because that's what the Holy Spirit hears. That's what the universe hears. As a person thinks, so is that person. So whatever is going on in your life, it's there because you thought it. You thought it into existence. God bless you. Wear your mask. Stay safe and love yourself and pray for yourself and for one another, especially triumphant Thursdays.